really nice to be here. And I just want to say right off the bat, there are two things. One, I want to echo Pradeep's thoughts that this is not CEO versus CHRO. This is CEO and CHRO. And one of the key principles that I followed in my career through my entire career is the head of HR is the number 2 guy in the company. I believe that the balance sheet of human asset and liabilities is probably a lot more valuable to companies, and hence the financial balance sheet is a outcome of having a strong human asset and liabilities balance sheet. So I want to just start off saying that I echo with him. It is CEO and CHRO, not versus. And I also don't really like the term HR. I don't like the term human resources because it commoditizes people. And I really believe that if you really think that human beings are assets to the organization, then you have to call it that. You can't say human resources because that just says that you're just like a resource like any tool or anything that I require. And so I typically tend to like the terms employee engagement, employee experience, human assets, things like that, that probably reflect the philosophy a little bit better than human resources. Now he's given me a free format thing to do, and so, I hope that you'll keep me on time. When I'm around 7 minutes, please do stop me. But a lot of times CEOs tend to think a lot about what is the strategy, what are the markets are going after. I think all of those are very important, but I think equally important is starting with the org structure. And so for me, at least, when I start with thinking about where we are headed, I don't always start with the numbers. I always think about, do we have the right places? Obviously, it is in the context of where you're trying to go. But it's not about today. As a CEO, you're typically looking 3 to 5 years out. And I'm saying 5 years a little bit on the outer end because technology disruption is disrupting almost every industry so quickly that it is very hard to imagine what 5 years looks like. So typically, we tend to do 3-year plannings. And in that 3-year, what does your organization look like? And then the people that you have in the org today, are they the right people? If growing businesses is about change, then I think that there is a key philosophy that has played in my mind, and I've tweeted about it a lot as well, is that if you're trying to drive change, you have to either change the people or change the people. So either you change the people, as in physically get new people, or you change the people as in their mindset. And that all begins. So as a CEO of a company, I think the key job is culture creation. A culture in which people feel empowered. The worst thing that a CEO can do, or anybody, any manager or any leader can do, is to hire the best people you can and then not let them do their job. So creating a culture is probably one of the most important elements, and that is where HR becomes a key partner. And so if the HR head is the second most important person in the business, then he's got a big responsibility to play. And I think Pradeep is right that many leaders have looked at HR as very tactical, do the administration, ensure compliance. But if your philosophy is that people are the most important, then compliance is absolutely a non-negotiable, but it is the bare minimum a company has to do for its people. So when somebody says that I comply with all the laws, you have to. There's no choice. But you've got to do far more than that. And that is where I think HR becomes a critical partner. I also don't believe that HR is the keeper of a lot of things like learning and development and promotions and merit increases. That job squarely lies with the business leaders and managers. HR is a facilitator and an enabler of the process, but also ensures that when you get your merit and promotion recommendations, that you're looking at it to ensure that the philosophy of compensation is being reflected in that. I'll give you an example. If you believe that you have differentiation and compensation, and you believe that your best people must make the most money, and you want to make sure that the bottom 5% is constantly being let go because you want to make sure the organization is a well-performing organization, then in those merit increases, you cannot have a peanut butter approach. If everybody says, I'm just going to take, this is my budget available for merit, and I'm just going to give everybody a 5% increase, then that does not reflect the philosophy of differentiated performance management. And you've got to make sure that that happens. So HR is a very strategic function in my organization, and I have derived personally a lot of success by teaming up with my HR leader And we've had a fantastic journey. BMC just got recognized as top 31 great places to work in the country now. And this was only a second year that we did. So last year we got 42, this year we were number 31. And our goal is to be top 10. And that cannot happen without a forward-looking HR organization, without a forward-looking HR leader who is a trusted advisor not only to me, but to my entire management team. And while in every organization there is always going to be friction, there's always going to be the sales guy wants something that the finance guy is not willing to fund. All that friction is desirable, but it is the HR leader who plays a very important role in ensuring that there is camaraderie between the leaders, and that there is friendship between the leaders, and that you don't have outliers who are so different from the culture of the organization that they're going to end up deteriorating the culture. And so he's the conscience keeper of the organization, a trusted advisor to the CEO and the executives within the company. And then I think magic happens. I think most people suffer from trying to find meaning in their life, trying to find purpose in their life. And when we think of human resources just as resources, as a person that is part of a process, a very well-defined job responsibility, and we don't take the time to talk to those people. And you can't do this one-to-one. In a large-scale organization, you really can't be talking to people one-to-one to provide meaning to them. But I think it all starts at the CEO level. At the CEO level, first thing that we have to do is we have to change our vocabulary. And I talked about this earlier when I said CEOs are responsible for culture. Now, if you typically look at how a CEO talks, he talks about shareholder value, share price, market capitalization, big deals that came through. Tell me which of this really makes any sense to an engineer on the shop floor. Now I'm from IT, and IT is all about knowledge work. We tend to pamper our people a little bit more. They're all knowledge workers, and so we tend to engage with them differently. But when you're talking about all of these things, how is it relevant to an engineer who doesn't have any shares in the company? You don't share profits with the guy. So when you're talking all those big things, do you really think you're resonating with that one guy? Do you think you're providing any sense of purpose or meaning to the guy? You're not. So when you start talking, you're going to change your vocabulary, and it has to be very targeted. You can't have one all hands and have a message that resonates with all the people. So you have to be very targeted in your communication. And as you talk to the engineers, you want to talk about, so in my business, for example, we build monitoring software, we build a service desk software where if there is an incident, then you raise a ticket and then we solve it. Now an engineer can look at it and say, I'm doing some programming, right? But when you start talking to the guy saying that when you're building monitoring software and you're monitoring some of the largest telco networks in the world, then when you travel on business and you call your daughter to say goodnight to her, it's because your monitoring software is ensuring that the network is up, that your call goes through. That is an example of trying to link somebody who's writing a piece of code, to the bigger picture. And there's a story which I'm sure you guys have heard of multiple times. I'll say it again, there was a guy who was walking and saw these three people breaking rocks. And he said, as the first guy, what are you doing? I'm breaking a rock. And second guy, what are you doing? I'm breaking a rock. And it's the third guy, what are you doing? He says, I'm building the Taj Mahal. Now, their all actions are exactly the same. They're all breaking rocks. But one of them sees his place in a bigger thing. He sees his place in a bigger thing. I think that when you talk about engaging people, in my mind, engagement is about providing a sense of purpose or providing meaning, so that person understands his place in the larger thing. And hopefully, the larger thing is not all about making money. And this is where I'll fault a lot of the CEOs also. The only language CEOs talk is about how profitable. It's a very important element, so don't get me wrong. If your business basics are not in place, you run the risk of running the business to the ground, and all of the people are going to lose their jobs, and your customers are going to suffer. So don't get me wrong in that perspective. But I think it is very important to not only talk about profits. It is very important to talk about why do you exist as a company, and what is the bigger problem you're trying to solve. So yeah, because HR in my mind also helps do the communication, right? So CEO's job is to communicate, but HR is the facilitator of that communication. Is the person that can say, don't have one all hands, why don't you have 5 meetings instead? Talk to the finance guys differently, talk to the sales guys differently, talk to the engineers differently, and make the communication relevant. Yeah, and then you had one on support and influence. I think, again, I might be a little bit of an outlier, but to me, my HR head has unconditional support, provided he takes the time to invest in understanding what are the business goals of the company. In other words, I don't expect my head of HR to have only philosophical arguments with me. In the context of the business, when I know that you understand the context of the business and the advice you're giving me is the right advice, he's got unconditional support. Right? So I think on the support thing, I think some of the responsibility falls back on HR, how you perceive yourself. If you perceive yourself as an administrator, then it's a whole different ballgame, whole different relationship. If you perceive yourself as a business partner, it's a whole different thing. And then I just want to elaborate on what Vineet said. A lot of, at least us in the IT, software business, are seeing a lot more millennials come in, and the millennials behave differently than perhaps our generation does. And to understand that, to them, technology is native. They're digital natives. We are digital immigrants. To understand what their expectations are. They need instant gratification. They will not complain to you. They'll tweet about a problem in the company before they come back and talk to you. You know, got to understand those dynamics. And a lot of the CEOs are like me, digital immigrants, and I'm in technology and I'm a digital immigrant, you know. So many of especially if you're in the manufacturing industry, it may be a little bit worse off. So I think the strategy to deal with the millennials and the next workforce that is going to come through to prepare the executive management and the CEO kind of is your job. I also think that the CEO of a larger, different sizes of companies matter. In a publicly traded company, the CEO might be spending 50% or more of his time with investors, and maybe only 20, 30% with salespeople, and then 10% internally. So that means your responsibility of filling that other 90%, that squarely falls on HR, and you have to do it in the context of business. So everything is in the context of business. Don't be numbers driven. Numbers are an important element of how things are performing, but be context driven. My final advice to all of you guys in the HR business is understand the context, become a trusted advisor, and read one book. It's called What the CEO Wants. We know what we want from the CEO. Please take the time to understand what the CEO wants from you.